Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Third Impact Anime Podcast. I'm your host, Austin, and you better put that thing back where it came from, or so help me, because on this episode of the podcast, we're talking about Makoto Shinkai's latest film, Suzume, and I'm joined by a wonderful cohort of running chairs. Who do I have with me tonight going in, I guess, Discord order?
It is I, Bill, humming and deeply breathing a wonderful song in my head.
And Tori, my cat is absolutely not allowed to watch this movie.
That's for the best.
And Ryan, and this movie made me hungry enough that I have curry on the oven currently.
Well, it should make you hungry enough for Big Macs too, because of all the product placement.
Curry, Big Macs, ramen. This movie
Uber
really
Eats.
made me hungry.
Yeah, dude, Uber Eats, that's right. Man, I know that was Bill's favorite thing about the movie, was all the ads.
More just the astonishment of them, especially the Spotify stuff, but we'll get there when we get there.
That's true. But yeah, we're going to talk about Suzume. We all got a chance to see it in theaters, like last week or 2 weeks ago, so yeah.
Wait, we were supposed to watch this movie before we talk about it?
Yes, Ryan, you were supposed to watch the movie. Do you need to dip out and then come back?
Yeah, I might need to be back in like 4 seconds or so.
Okay, well, through the magic of podcasts, Ryan has now seen this movie.
Woo!
Nice,
awesome. I love editing. Anyway, yeah, we're going to talk about it. I think it's always an interesting time to be an anime fan whenever there's a new Shinkai out, and we haven't had one since Weathering with You in 2019, which we talked about back in, oh gosh, what was the number of that episode? I pulled it up. Episode 90 of the podcast. And what episode are we on now? 139? Yeah, we're on 139. So we talked about Weathering with You. Gosh, ages ago, it feels like. March 4th, 2020 is the date that episode came out. And then we talked about Your Name back when we were a completely different podcast.
Yeah, that was like our 7th episode, I think.
It was literally our 7th episode. That is correct.
All right, good guess.
Did you look that up, or
no?
Did you,
I didn't. I just totally guess?
Oh wow!
I remembered we watched it in April and we started the podcast in like February. So I was just like, okay, probably we were about bi-weekly then. So you know.
Yeah, dude, it was literally episode 7, which
right.
Listeners at home, listen at your own risk. I cannot speak to the quality of that episode because it was ages ago. Don't know if it's any good or not.
Yeah.
Maybe let us know by leaving us a comment on thirdimpactanime.com. Hey folks, Editing Austin here. This episode of the podcast was recorded about a month ago and was intended to be released before we attended Animazement 2023 in Raleigh, North Carolina. Since the edit was delayed until after the convention, I've taken out the part of the podcast in the beginning where we hype up all the stuff that we're going to be doing at the convention, and I just cut to the chase with our review of Suzume. But since we don't like lost media here at Third Impact if we can help it, I've released the cut audio as a bonus recording on our Patreon. It is the world's worst bonus I could think of because it's entirely due to my own lackadaisical editing workflow, but one man's trash is another man's bonus podcast, I guess. You can find it under our $3 tier at patreon.com/thirdimpactanime. Anyway, on to the episode. Okay, so production on this film began pretty shortly after Weathering with You was released in 2019, and one of the big inspirations for what Shinkai wanted to do with this movie, different from his other films, was his personal reflection on the history of Japan, especially when it comes to natural disasters. Because, I mean, just like any country, but I think Japan more specifically because they're such a small nation, such a small culture, they are almost constantly besieged by disasters of any shape and form. You know, earthquakes are really common, tsunamis, etc., and other things as well.
Island nation as well.
Right, exactly, on a massive fault line and all of that stuff. But he was specifically very inspired by the events of 3/11, the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami that happened back then. And there's been a lot of Japanese media in the last decade or so that has been sort of a commentary or a response or reaction to that specific event, because I mean it was catastrophic. Like the nuclear fallout from the Fukushima reactors like made certain portions of the country like completely uninhabitable to this day. Like 20,000 people died from that. There's so much death and desolation from that event. It's a major disaster that happened to that, and films like Shin Godzilla really sort of comment on that. Even Your Name to an extent, because there's the plot point of like the comet coming down and basically destroying is it Mitsuha or Mitsuwa is the store.
Mitsuha is the store. The main character is Mitsuha.
Thank you. Yeah, Mitsuha, her whole town was destroyed by that comet, and Shinkai has talked a bit about being inspired by the earthquake as well, because it did just kind of wipe out some towns from the face of the map. So a lot of that is kind of what he's pulling from when it comes to his thinking about Suzume. And during the press tour for Weathering with You, he got to visit a lot of different places that were affected by disasters over time. So that's kind of where the idea of doing kind of a road trip movie came from, where Suzume would go to different places in Japan that had been affected by natural disasters throughout history. And he talks about some specific ones. Like I don't have all of them written down, but he talked like most of the places where she visits throughout the film are places that have had like historical disasters of one shape or form over time. It's not just any one thing in particular.
I had wondered about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't think that's... I mean, we could talk about this later, but I don't think the knowledge of that is intrinsic to being entertained by this movie, but it does really give it this sort of anchor point to real-life people, real-life history, whenever you see, like, oh, this is her going to very specific places that have this actual real-world context to them. I think that just adds a whole extra layer of meaning to what this movie is trying to go for.
Yeah, I was gonna say it kind of unveils a different layer when you have that lens of the cultural context of that these were real locations and they're all tied to the historical event and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
I think he said in an interview that the giant worm monsters represented like the natural disasters affecting the areas.
Right. And I think in one of those interviews as well, it's just like the reason why he depicted the monster as kind of this like big amorphous worm thing is because he specifically didn't want to do like a Godzilla kaiju thing, because he knows that there's already so much of that exists already, and he wanted it to be a little bit more ambiguous.
Yeah, the worm kind of reminded me, like style wise, or just like kind of how it looked sometimes, of like the comet from Your Name.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
So he probably has like just kind of in his mind's eye like an idea of what disaster looks like, if that makes sense.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, or to me it kind of looks like a fault line. Sort of is how I was taking it, because like when it would come up and then it would fall back down, and that was the epicenter basically of whatever was about to happen. So
yeah, it's a good point. And I think making the symbol what it is being kind of ambiguous, you can kind of project a bunch of different kinds of meanings onto it, which is I think very intentional. I think he was probably doing that on purpose.
Yeah.
So another angle of inspiration for Suzume was, of course, COVID. So they were writing this in early 2020 whenever Japan went into lockdown, much like the rest of the world. And he, like all of us, back then, felt this profound sense of being, trapped. You can't really do much. There's nowhere to go, no one to see, because, everything is effectively shut down. So, and this really made me laugh. This is just a hilarious way to process something that's like really quite tragic that we all lived through and are, still trying to process as individuals and as this society. The reason why he turned the secondary main character Sota into a chair is because during the COVID lockdowns, he felt like he was turning into a chair because he was like trapped in his chair all day. And I'm like, dang,
he was just so sedentary
clever.
that he felt like a chair.
I like that.
Just like, dang, that is real funny.
That's great.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful.
Quite poignant too.
It is. I'm sure we can all deeply relate to that. And I think, he also talked about, he kind of had the idea of wanting to do a sort of non-traditional main character pairing for the film in contrast to the works he had done previously. Because you look back through his filmography, it's pretty consistent. Our main characters are like regular boy, regular girl. So here he was like, well, I kind of want to do something different. So how about regular girl and a chair?
Yeah.
Which I'm like, that's cool. It's a different idea. So he's kind of experimenting with new concepts here.
Yeah. He also talked about in interviews that as he's gotten older, he's had a harder time connecting with those kind of youthful romance stories. It kind of reminded me of how in Ava the main character shifted from Shinji to Gendo because oh my god, I'm having a brain fart on names. Thank you. How Ano was starting to connect more with Gendo as he got older. He and also Makoto Shinkai did say in an announcement that, or an interview, that he was thinking about doing an LGBT relationship. I think it was going to be but that didn't come to pass, which I would have been interested to see what he would have done with that.
Yeah, you just had me going for a second. I was like, wait, he didn't do that, right? I didn't miss an entire thing in this movie. That didn't happen.
No. He thought about doing it, but he didn't do that.
Right. And I mean, I guarantee you that since he said that, and even if he hadn't said it, if it's working around in his mind, that'll probably be something he explores down the line in the future. Yeah. Because, I mean, as we can see, and we could talk about this a little bit, I see Suzume as kind of a turning point in Shinkai's career, and only time will tell whether or not that sticks, but he definitely seems to clearly be interested in telling different types of stories going forward, and you can see his the types of movies that he's been making after Garden of Words have been like natural disasters have been a huge part of that. They're part of Your Name, part of Weathering with You, part of Suzume as well. So he keeps building on these ideas that he's been thinking about. So if he said that he wanted to explore that, I have every reason to believe he's probably going to do that at some point in the future.
Yeah, I think Suzume was a very pivotal moment kind of in his film career, because the entire time I kept thinking I went in sort of knowing, well, I don't want to say knowing, I went in expecting okay, well, this is going to be the same thing, and then I was very pleasantly surprised that it was much more actiony and much more it was just so tonally different than everything he had put out kind of up until then, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more, but yeah, I was very taken aback by kind of what I had gotten, so yeah, it's going to be different going forward, I think, with him.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So to get in a little bit to the production staff, of course, we've been talking about him the whole time. This film is written and directed by Makoto Shinkai, the now, I guess, modern legendary director of Your Name, Weathering with You, 5 centimeters per second, Garden of Words, etc., etc. You all know this guy. I don't need to explain him to you.
Right.
We've got the musical composer is Kazuma Jinouchi, who did the music for Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex 2040, which Bill would tell you is the best looking Ghost in the Shell they've ever made, right?
No. It was good to have the old dubcast back, and the story was good, but that did not look good. But that's to be expected from Netflix anime. It's a roll of the dice. Either it looks pretty good or it doesn't look great at all.
And so, I heard the pain in Bill's voice there of you like daring to say that.
And then, of course, he reunites again with his favorite band, the Radwimps, to come back again. But I'll say, I think, and I feel like the Radwimpsiness of this movie is a lot more subdued this time around.
They're there.
They're there. They're lurking like a giant worm underneath the earth. They are lurking. They are present, but they're not as over the top present as they were in something like Your Name, for example. So they did work on this with him again. They did the theme song, which is a collaboration between them and a very young, up-and-coming TikTok cover artist named Toaka, who I don't think has worked like in a professional context until this. So that she just got discovered online, and now she's in a major motion picture. So good for her.
Yeah.
And that theme song, which you've probably heard already in this episode, is really great. It's very catchy. So we have our character designs are by Masayoshi Tanaka, who, even if you don't know his name, you're probably familiar with some of his work because he's been fairly prolific over the last decade or so. He was the chief animation director and character designer on Anohana, one of my favorite shows, and also Waiting in the Summer and High School of the Dead, and he worked on the opening for Your Name. Did he do the character designs for Weathering with You and Your Name as well?
No, but I believe he worked on the production.
Okay.
In some capacity.
So we have a returning Comics Wave champion, Takumi Tanji, who returns as the art director, who has been with Makoto Shinkai for a very long time. So his signature Shinkai-esque art direction is present in full force with those beautiful sunsets, beautiful cityscapes, beautiful landscapes, and so on that we've come to expect from Comics Wave. And the animation director is Kenichi Tsuchiya. What is he, the character designer for Your Name and Garden of Words?
Yeah, he was an animation director and key animator on Your Name and Garden of Words, and was the character designer and key animator on Weathering with You.
Tori, would you like to do our cast for us?
Yeah, I can totally do that. Okay. Our cast, the cast of this movie is actually really, really incredible, considering there's a lot of first-time voice actors for a lot of these roles. Really cool stuff. So for Suzume in Japanese, she is voiced by Nanoka Hara. This is her very first anime voice credit, but she'll be playing Mizuho in the live-action adaptation of Wave Listen to Me, and she's mainly been a live-action actress. And then I've been flipping out about this all day because it's very timely for me, but in English, she is voiced by Nicole Sakura, who I have recently discovered in the TV show Superstore, but she was also the village bride in the first Star Wars Visions, and then was Emily in Until Dawn.
Man, that's wild.
Which is her...
Yeah.
How often do like bit characters from NBC sitcoms end up in anime? Like, it's weird.
No, and it's so funny. I think what, like I was just saying, what entertains me the most is just like the juxtaposition between the character that she plays in that TV show, because I really love her character in that show. She's just very funny. And so that character versus like Suzume, and the way, I mean, we saw the subtitled version, so I really want to rewatch this in English now, but it's just like, I'm just imagining Suzume as her character in Superstore, and it's just doing a lot for me. Anyway, Sota in Japanese is voiced by Hokuto Matsumura. He's a live action actor. He was in the 2018 adaptation of Kids on the Slope. He's a singer in the group Stones, and this was his first anime role. In English, he is voiced by Josh Keaton, who was Thomas Taurus in Tiger and Bunny 2, and he was Shiro in Voltron. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, Josh Keaton's done a ton of things.
Yeah, Sota has that kind of cool guy energy. So, Daijin, which was
he's Hal for a new generation.
Yes, Daijin in Japanese is voiced by An Yamane, and in English, Daijin is voiced by Lena Josephine Morano, both literal children, and both of these girls, this is their first voice acting role, so that's very sweet, I think. I hope they have a very good career.
I wonder if this is a similar, and once again, a similar similarity? I don't want to say that. A similar similarity. What? A connection point of this movie to Monsters, Inc., because they also cast a literal child to play Boo in that movie.
Yes,
and it's a movie about doors.
And then Tomoya, in Japanese, was voiced by Ryunosuke Kamiki. He was Taki in Your Name, Sho in Arietti, and Markle in How. And then English, he is voiced by, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, sorry if I am not, is Joe Zieja, and he was Claude in Fire Emblem Three Houses. And then Tsubame, who is Suzume's mom, was voiced by the very famous Kana Hanazawa. You may know her in such roles as Akane from Psycho-Pass, Mitsuri in Demon Slayer, and Hanakawa in Monogatari series. And then in English, she's voiced by Allegra Clark, who is Puko in Agretsuko, Maki in Jujutsu Kaisen. Tamaki, who is Suzume's aunt, in Japanese is voiced by Eri Fukatsu. This is also her voice
roll.
Her voice. Widowy.
I'm walking here.
Widowy. Sorry, let me start over. God. In Japanese, she is voiced by Eri Fukatsu. This is also her first animated voice role. Mostly, she's also a live-action actress, including the live-action adaptation of Parasite. And then in English, she is voiced by Jennifer Sun Bell, and she is apparently multiple characters in Genshin Impact. And then Rumi, who was the mom who also worked at the Hostess Club. In Japanese, she was voiced by Sari Ito. She was Midori in Eizouken, and then in English, she was voiced by Amanda C. Miller, who is known for voicing Sailor Jupiter in the newer dub of Sailor Moon, and was Mikage in Durarara. And then we have Chika, who was the girl on the Vespa. In Japanese, she was voiced by Kotone Hanase. This was actually her first voice acting role as well. And then in English, she was voiced by Rosalie Chang, who was Mei Mei in Turning Red, which was really cool, actually.
Oh, what?
Yeah, to just find out. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes. And then last but not least, Minoru, who was Sota's friend in Japanese, was voiced by Shota Sometani. He was Kamashin in Bell and also the main character in Parasite. And then
the live action Parasite.
The live action Parasite, yes, thank you. And then in English, he is voiced by Roger Craig Smith, who has voiced Sonic in some iterations, but most importantly, Chris Redfield in Resident Evil.
He's like the Sonic guy, right? Like, that's not John Ralphio?
I don't know anything about Sonic.
He's the video game Sonic guy, and he's been doing it for a really long time, and I'm a little inclined to say that Sonic's more important than Chris Redfield, sorry.
I have no frame of reference for Sonic, so...
No, Roger Craig Smith is responsible for most of the meme lines that you know and love today.
Cool, okay.
I want to see both of them in the same video game so that they can talk to each other.
Yeah, that doesn't seem likely.
We just need a Sega versus Capcom fighting game, and then
actually all we need is Chris and Smash.
That's never gonna happen. Maybe in Smash Ultimate 2.
Yeah, Smash Ultimater.
All right, Bill. So if you could introduce, sort of generally speaking, we've kind of touched on some broad strokes about what this movie is about, but just go ahead and lay it all out there. What is this? What is Suzume about?
Sure. Our story is about a girl named Suzume that on her way to school she meets a mysterious man who asks for directions for any ruins in the area. Intrigued, Suzume goes to an abandoned factory town where the man is headed. Suzume goes to an abandoned factory town where the man is headed. There she finds a mysterious door standing alone in an open space. Opening it, she sees a beautiful star-filled field that she is not able to enter. As she's looking at it, she picks up a stone cat statue, which in turn turns into a real cat. Freaked out, Suzume leaves the area, but back at school, she notices a large red cloud that no one else can see. Going back to investigate, she sees a supernatural force coming out of the door with the mysterious man trying to close it together. They're able to do so, and it is revealed the cat, who goes by the name of Daijin, is one of the guardians of the door and has now abandoned its post. This mysterious man, known as Sota, gets into an argument with Daijin, who in turn turns him into the childhood chair of Suzume. Now, Suzume and a transformed Sota must travel all across Japan to find Daijin and turn Sota back to normal, and to close any other gates caused by Daijin leaving its post as guardian.
I think that pretty much well covered it. So it's a girl and a chair's bizarre adventure across Japan to various cities.
Carrying that chair on the subway, on a boat, on a train, by car, by Vespa. It's just
they could eat it here, they could eat it there.
They could eat it anywhere.
I mean, it's kind of a hilarious bit just to watch the visual comedy of seeing this chair just like walk around and run around, and like she's constantly carrying it, and it's good visual comedy. Like it's very silly. Like it sounds terrible on paper, but in real life it's quite amusing.
Yeah, I like that the people in the world too don't really question it beyond kind of like, what was that? And then everybody just kind of moves on with their life.
It's kind of like a myth of it gets caught on social media, like Daijin and the chair moving around.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
so like people see it, but then they're like, well, wait, what was that? We didn't get a clear view of it.
Yeah, I mean, there is like an interesting social media angle too, because they use social media to sort of track Daijin's locations throughout the movie. I guess sort of going back to the beginning here, we sort of touched on, how we generally feel about Shinkai, having seen his work and all of us having followed his career for quite a long time at this point. So I guess what expectations were y'all taking into Suzume, and how did you feel about those expectations coming out of it? I guess for me, Tori kind of touched on mine a little bit. I was expecting this to just kind of be Your Name Part 3, because Weathering with You was so much of like Your Name again, but with more guns. And I just kind of expected this to be that again, and I was deeply and pleasantly surprised that it was kind of a turning point, like I said earlier, for Shinkai, because I feel like it wasn't really about romance this time. It was more of an action film, more of a journey, of a road trip movie, and it touched on relationships outside of romance. So I was very pleased with it. I think there are some issues with it that are like pet peeves of mine that come up at the end, but we can talk about that as well. But I'm generally pretty positive on this one. How else were you guys feeling?
Yeah, pretty much. Like I pretty much expect any Shinkai movie to look like very colorful, because that's like the visual style that I associate with him, like very vibrant and colorful, and that definitely delivered for me. Like that was like my bare minimum expectation, but I didn't expect him to do Your Name again, just because Your Name wasn't even the first time he did Your Name.
Well, that's kind of, for me, that's why I expected it to be Your Name Part 3, because Your Name is just 5 centimeters per second too. I mean, like, but better.
Yeah.
I think I went in, I was like, well, I'm probably gonna get a romance, and there's probably gonna be some paranormal-ish fantasy angle to it. And I was kind of right on some of it. And then like when they started kind of setting up for romance, I was like, wait a minute, she's a high schooler and he's like a nondescript age college student. Please don't. And they didn't. It was like it definitely could have been read as like a platonic like love story. Like, you know, you just care about somebody, you love them, and like a platonic, like you love them because you care about them.
Yeah.
You love someone like you love your chair, you know?
Right. Like, you know, you want somebody to do well and you have love for them. And I was pleased with that, but like I hit the beats that I was expecting, but when it kind of like took on that action turn and at some points could have delved into almost like a horror movie, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Nice. Thank you. Appreciate it for not doing the same thing over and over. Well, like when they were sealing the doors and stuff, like the stakes were very, very high and like dark there. I mean, that could have taken a very dark turn very quickly. And especially, I know we're going to get into it, but like that ending bit where like all of those people were about to die, that was very horrific.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there was a huge amount of weight going on there. I mean, and I think that was very purposeful. You know, he wanted to indicate that the big worms, or whatever they were calling them, were like, I mean, they're supposed to be analogs to natural disasters, and lots of people unfortunately died during those.
Yeah, where it was like just thinking back to Your Name, because I mean that's the one I've seen the most. I mean, I've only seen a couple of his films, but Your Name is the one I have seen the most. But it was like the gravity of that situation. It was a very isolated incident. Like, yes, like her village, like those people were impacted, but it was a very isolated incident where like these were incidents going on all over Japan where like hundreds of thousands of people were potentially going to die. So it was like affecting everybody and not necessarily just one village that it did in Your Name. I mean, it still sucks people died, but it was much more of an isolated incident, whereas in like Suzume there were much more lives, there were bigger consequences essentially. I guess is
stakes
what I'm trying to get
higher.
at. Yeah,
for sure.
I have a mixed feelings about Makoto Shinkai. I think all his movies are gorgeous to look at. Like, I wish there was more art books of his movies because his backgrounds are gorgeous to look at. But I've always had plot problems with his movies, like 5 centimeters per second, and especially with Garden of Words, where the romantic angles of those movies just frustrate me for another podcast talk. I liked Your Name a lot, but I've not really clicked with any of his other work. And Suzume was the first one that I felt like I didn't have any glaring plot issues that I normally had with his work.
Well, dang, we'll call him up on the phone and say, wow, he finally pleased Bill.
He'll be like, he's going to be like, who?
Shinkai can sleep well tonight.
Yeah.
I don't think Shinkai needs my stamp of approval. I think he's got all his stamps of approval from Spotify and from Lawson's and
from being the fourth highest grossing film in Japan of all time. But never mind. It's all about Bill's approval.
That's not the important part.
Right.
The important part is that we are happy.
That's right.
But he sticks to themes he's gone back to a lot, like having a sci-fi element. I do like that he changed things up slightly. Like, thinking about it, there is a horror element to this story of this unmitigated disaster that we know is coming as the audience, and they're the unsuspecting victims of these major cities, and also just trying to close the doors were very hair-raising. Like the sequence when they're on the Ferris wheel could be very hair-raising. Or I think it's when they're in Tokyo when they're having to deal with the train. So, it being more action-oriented was a nice change of pace, and we'll get into the relationship stuff later, but I also found that interesting where it wasn't a straight romantic relationship, but I do have some nitpicks about it, but we'll get into that in a bit.
Well, Bill, just go ahead and get into it. Like, what were those nitpicks based on what you saw in terms of the relationships of the film?
I wish they had... It's funny because Sota and Suzume are the main characters, right? And our focus is on them primarily through the movie. But I never felt like the movie gave them time to show us them really developing a rapport amongst each other. Because they're always having to go on the move to get to the next door when they see Daijin. I felt more interested in the relationship between Suzume and her aunt. I thought that had a much stronger narrative connection because we get all those flashbacks, and then we get an idea of kind of the negative view the aunt might have on Suzume about her having to take care of Suzume and basically take on the mother role. And I felt like that relationship was much stronger, and I would have liked to have seen that more explored. Whereas I felt like Sota and Suzume was very much like, we have a goal and we have to get to it.
So basically, you wanted more emotional carnage.
I wanted a stronger connection between the two of them because I can see why they care for each other. Because it's very much like we're two people in the trenches trying to stop this calamity.
It was trauma bonding.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah, I could see that, but I never felt like the movie gave them time to just really talk with each other.
For sure.
Well, not to play defense too hard based on what the author has said and his personal intentions, because I think you've got some fair points there. But like, I think that I think that based on Shinkai's previous works, I feel like that would have been an easy trap for him to fall into, to once again do a boy and girl grow in their relationship between one another, the movie. And I think maybe he intentionally put this magical wedge between the two of them to focus on other relationships because he didn't want to do that. And sure, yeah, maybe it kind of neuters their connection to one another, but I think that I don't think their relationship is bad, but I definitely see him focusing more on the emotional tension between her and her aunt for the scenes that we do see them in, significantly so. So, I mean, maybe he just kind of did that on purpose. He didn't want to do the same thing again, because if he did that again, it would just be the same thing again. I don't know if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
I get that, but when Suzume near the end is basically willing to sacrifice herself to get Sota back, it was hard for me to connect with because they didn't really have a strong rapport between the two of them, I feel.
It's because she's a good person.
It was hard for me to get emotionally invested with her choice.
I mean, I think they have enough connection where that makes sense. And clearly, Suzume is a very, she really grows as a person and grows in responsibility throughout the course of the movie. So that didn't strike me as odd, whatsoever. Because, of course she would want to save this person that, she's been working with this whole time, whose entire life has basically been dedicated to, protecting Japan from these natural disasters. Because one detail of the story that we haven't talked about yet is that basically Sota, he works as there's a name for it in the film. A closer.
Mm-hmm.
And he's part of this sort of supernatural order of things. He's passed down this information from his father and from his grandfather, who we do see briefly, to basically be caretakers of whenever doors show up and the giant worm tries to escape, they take care of it because only they're able to see that or have the power to, say the spell or the chant to prevent that from happening. So, yeah. I was going somewhere with that. Oh gosh.
I'll give you a minute to figure that out, but when Tori just said closer, my mind short-circuited for a second because while correct, I just finished watching Suits, and one of the main characters is constantly referred to as the best closer in the city. And I'm just like, wait, hold on. He's not Harvey Specter. What's going on here?
Yuck, yuck, yuck.
Kind of like you were saying, I did think that they had enough of a relationship to kind of develop, even if he was a chair for 99% of it. Because they how many gates did they close together?
At least 4.
Yeah, 4 or 5.
And they also spent multiple scenes speaking to each other.
Yeah.
She was sharing her concerns and things like that with him and things. So they were developing their bond. It's not like they spent a lot of time off screen with each other and then came back and were like, we're in love.
But it was more with the Vespa girl or the mom who runs the bar.
Yeah.
He was listening in. And
now I would actually argue the Vespa girl kind of got the short end of the stick because they did get a lot of off scene because it basically was them running around cleaning and being like, ha 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 boys, ha 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 shopping, we're besties now, come on over anytime you want, and then you never see her again after that.
Yeah.
Now the mom did have more to do with it. She did spend an extended amount of time with the mom, but I don't know, I feel like her and Sota did get a good enough amount of time to bond, and I think because they're interested in each other, at least the way I read it, and I feel like people will probably agree, is it's not a romantic love, at least the way I saw it. So I think
by the end I definitely think it was.
You think it was?
Definitely. I think it's ambiguous. I think you're both correct.
For sure.
It was just that was just the vibe I was getting, and I could be completely wrong, but that was the vibe I was getting. I also did, to your point though, I did find it funny that every time he was asleep and she couldn't wake him up, she tried the Princess and the Frog method.
Yeah.
I found that very funny.
That was a good bit.
Funny.
That was funny.
Yeah, that's good.
But yeah, I don't. But see, I mean, that is typically my like chief complaint with romance stories too. Is I feel like it's either way too fast, it's insta love, or it's just not there at all, I guess. And I don't know. I feel like in the time frame this movie had, I feel like it did a good enough job at working with what it had. I think at least to me.
I should clarify. I wasn't saying that they're romantic partners. I'm more in the idea of they're platonic friends, and that's what I was.
I hope so, just because of the age range.
Because of the what? Yeah.
Because of the age range.
Oh no, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like that's
no, like
exactly
I truly
my whole
hope
point.
it is. However, we do know that in anime that has not always been the case, unfortunately.
I mean, Garden of Words.
Yeah.
Who directed that?
I mean,
nothing.
There's like I can't remember the full name of the anime. It's like one of those mouthfuls, but basically it's the one involving a girl being found under a lamplight, and she tries to come on to the main character in the first episode, and he like puts his foot down and is just like, "We are not gonna have sex." And I was like, "Thank you, Japan, for finally like doing this." And then by the end of the series, they're like, "Okay, maybe when you get older." And I'm like, "Motherfucker."
Oh my god, no, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's like my hopes have kind of been dashed of like people doing the right thing with that.
Well, let's not let Ryan lead us down a road of a tangent.
Yeah. It's just that's all I had to say on the matter. Is it's like she was like way more emotional than I thought for somebody who had platonic love for somebody else. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's completely pointless to get hung up on this, because I think it is not critical to the story that is trying to be told whatsoever.
And it's so ambiguous. I think I was just trying to look at it in the sense of like, I think maybe she was listless and just like, I could be reading and like did way too much onto this, but I feel like she was listless, and this gave her something to kind of like, not necessarily fulfill herself, but I think there was some motivation here, and you kind of get what I'm getting at, you know, like the center on that journey, and sure. I don't know.
I think why we're getting hung up on this is because we expect it from Shinkai. So the expectations of his previous work are kind of like, we're trying to fit it into the puzzle that we're used to.
True.
When maybe this time it's like
in the past.
And that's okay. It doesn't have to fit into the puzzle.
And that's why
creator doesn't have to have every single thing fit into the mold every single time. And it shouldn't.
Right.
That's why I personally am so like, I'm fairly disinterested in like the relationship angle here, and I think that the connection between the two characters is fairly strong. And I mean, I think a little bit of it is circumstantial, because you do have this situation where like, yes, this guy literally gets transformed into a childhood heirloom of this girl who, you know, she has this deep personal connection to because of her deceased mother that is no longer around in a town that effectively doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. So this is like one of the few connection points to her mother, and now there's just like some guy in it. So there's a lot of weird emotional tornado stuff, a giant worm of emotion, if you will, to be put to put into this a very awkward situation where, like, of course she would not abandon him, because, you know, they have formed this rapport, but he also sort of represents in this physical form something that's like deeply important to her. So I guess that's something we could talk about as well. It's like something that's always in the background here is like Suzume's own personal history with tragedy. That's how the movie begins. You know, we start off with her basically having a dream of something that happened to her when she was a really little kid, which we learn later is like the events of 3/11 and her hometown being destroyed, and her mother, I guess, being killed in that event, missing.
Was it specifically 3/11 that like destroyed her town, or is it supposed to be ambiguous in the movie?
It's specifically 311 because when she opens her journal, you specifically see 311 on the top page.
Okay, I didn't notice that.
No, every natural disaster city, I guess, or location featured in this is supposed to be indicative of a real actual place. Shinkai has talked about this in interviews. He's just like, I knew it was this thing is this thing is that, etc.
Right. It wasn't the one-to-one names though, right?
It could have been in terms of the general city. I don't have it right in front of me, but he specifically said
I read
yes.
on this like right after I saw the movie, but I don't remember what I read, which I guess says a lot about my reading comprehension. But
Skim Master General.
Yeah, but no, I do remember that they were all based on real things, but based on does not always indicate actually. I think it was kind of one of those things of like she didn't seem to be super close with her aunt, and despite the big emotional fight that they had, that she was possessed, I think, ? That was kind of an odd scene. But yeah, they didn't have a perfect relationship, so I think it was like she found somebody that she could finally connect to and didn't want them to like go away.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely an interesting angle here, because you have her aunt who took her in after her mother passed away, and there's this whole tension of like her aunt being like she had to put her entire life on hold to take care of a child, and that wasn't in her plans. Like it's one thing if you plan to be a parent and you structure your life around that, and that's a decision that you make. But this was like thrust upon her through immense tragedy and the loss of her sister at the same time. So it's just like there's a lot of tension going on there, and like there is that sequence where Daijin, or the other spirit, basically like takes control of the aunt, and they have a confrontation where she says some truly nasty things to Suzume. I forget really what the narrative point of that scene was. If you guys remember, you can refresh me. But like,
I think it was supposed to just show her true feelings, because like everybody always censors themselves to a degree.
No,
but
that
was the opposite of the point.
It's a reflection of maybe deep-seated feelings that she might have had at a certain point. I really enjoyed that sequence because it shows that even if you care for someone, there's going to be times where you have anger or frustrations or things that you just keep to yourself that are just deep-seated within the back of your mind, and the spirit sort of revealed that even if it's not the whole truth, it's part of her regret or feelings maybe at a certain point, taking care of Suzume.
Right.
In the words of Avenue Q, the more you love someone, the more you want to kill them.
Thank you.
I think tension was already really high during that anyway, because they were stuck during the bad weather, and that was when they wrecked the car, right? But they were still kind of so they were still kind of frustrated about the weather, and I think it was all just kind of like little things leading up to that. And also it was just another character introduction, really, kind of. So
yeah, I mean, I think it was a high tension moment to sort of lay out there this conflict that's sort of been in the back of their relationship for years at this point. And I thought it was interesting to explore that, but it was also interesting to see the aunt basically be like, I don't really feel this way. Like, I understand that, in a way, having to take care of you was not my choice, but that doesn't mean that I don't do it with, every bit of love that I could possibly do it with.
She
Well,
she said something like, of course I've thought that, but that's not really true. And I think that's a very important distinction to make.
Yeah, like, I think she said something like, I've definitely felt that way sometimes, but I would never, like, blame you for what happened.
Right, right. I mean, there is a lot of, we've touched on it before, like how grief and trauma shapes people and how it shapes personal and family dynamics too. And you see this a bit with Sota and his grandfather. It's just like there's this tension of like him not being able necessarily to live the life that he wants because he's beholden to this job that he has to do, and in a way that kind of makes him similar to Suzume's aunt in that way. It's like she has to care for her.
So I was gonna say where his friend goes to his apartment to just basically just vent his frustrations of, this is the third time you've missed the teacher exam.
Right.
You can't keep doing this. Why are you doing this?
Right.
You need to move forward.
His defense, frustration with he was a chair.
This time. The other time's not so sure. Probably was not a chair.
Probably not.
Probably not. This is a total 180, but man, if I did not have so much raw delight watching that little chair run around, do that parkour, man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Man, fewer things have made me as giddy to watch in theaters as just watching that little chair on his three legs just go so funny.
Yeah, doing like flips on the back of the worm. I'm just like, dude, this chair has got moves.
I know, his little, like, the little of the chair legs really, really got me. I'm not gonna lie.
Mm-hmm.
The sound effect was really funny.
Yes.
Just the fluid animation too of the movement of the chair. Like it never felt like they cheapened out in terms of the animation. Like they went all out getting the three leg movement, getting the chair to jump around. Like it never felt like they, or based on my eyes, they never used any sort of animation tricks to make it easier on themselves. It was very detailed movement, which is hard to do. And
it was a funny moment whenever Suzume stops in the town and gets picked up by the random mother or of the two twins that just picks her up at the bus station because it's raining, and she's like, "Where do you need to go?" This random person stops and takes her in for a little bit. Truly selfless act to do, and then brings her back home to the I guess the apartment that is above the hostess club where she works. Mm-hmm. And Suzume and Sota just hang out with the kids for a while, and Sota's really trying to keep it together to not reveal that he is a sentient chair. And then he breaks the facade, and then Suzume is like, it's an AI chair. It'll walk around and it'll say things. And then they just have this fun little sequence where they like ride the chair around, and it's very cute.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That was an interesting cultural thing of just like people keep helping Suzume, like the girl in the Vespa and the mom who runs the hostess bar. Because it was hard for me to think about it from a Western perspective, because if this was made in an American setting, most people would be like, "Tough luck, I'm on my way." Good luck.
We would never do that.
Right.
Yeah, we would never do that. So it was interesting to see just like people will go, "Yeah, I'll help you get to where you need to go."
Right.
And there was no like, "What's in it for me?"
Right.
Like you can if you can help me with some things, great. But there was like no like, you have to pay me this amount of money or so and so.
Basically, like the reason why they're going from town to town is because that whenever Sota gets turned into the chair by the cat spirit Daijin basically just is like, "Peace, I'm out. You're stuck as a chair forever. Later."
Yeah.
And they have to like find him to get him to break the spell. So they keep going to these different towns where the worm keeps showing up to and trying to track him down, and they have to lock each door. But like you said, it's very much that road trip kind of thing. They interact with new and different types of people in every place that they visit, while trying to track down Daijin until they eventually snatch that little jerk.
To backtrack for like 2 seconds, I just want to say I was very shocked whenever she started hitchhiking And listen, I know it's a movie, and the story has to progress. But that she was hitchhiking, and then she was picked up, because it's very, very rare in Japan that people hitchhike. Like, it's just not a thing, that they do. So, yeah, that was a very interesting detail. Yeah. So
that's the thing. I think that kind of a Western perspective we have, though. You mentioned like they were just willing to help her. Like, there are definitely still people here who are like willing to help, but also people around here have an overwhelming sense of everyone is going to try to like kidnap or kill me. Yeah. So it's like, don't trust strangers type thing.
Right.
So I think that's kind of like where our backstop is, whereas over there they don't really have that problem.
And it's a film, right? He's constructing a narrative. He's trying to show that, you know, life and people continue even in these places where massive tragedies have occurred. Yeah. You know, people pick themselves up, people pick each other up together, and they do that by showing kindness to strangers, which is exactly what Suzume experiences. She is the recipient of kindness to strangers, which is exactly sort of what gets people through these big natural disasters that happen to them.
Yep.
So it really feeds in sort of the whole overall narrative that is being weaved here.
Can we do a transition in terms of trusting? It made me think of the villain, maybe not so villain, of the cat.
Mm-hmm.
The cat was weird.
The cat's very much like, I'm doing this because I want to be your friend, Suzume. Let's be friends.
Yeah, and then the cat like almost literally died when she said, "I hate you," and I'm just like, "Well, you
my god, that got me. That got me so bad."
I was like, "You are directly responsible for like the closest relationship she's ever had, like vanishing because you were being a cat."
Oh man, when Daijin came up and was like, Suzume doesn't love me anymore, and then immediately shrunk up. I was like, I gotta go home and hug my cat right now.
Gray, needed a bath. Yeah,
I know. I was like, no, take it back, Suzume.
Yeah. I came home and I gave Yoda a hug, and I'm just like, I love you, and you're never gonna turn into a shriveled mess.
I know. I was like, I don't care. You're trying to destroy the world. You need love.
Yeah, the Daijin was pretty like frustrating because you're just like, you're supposed to be the guardian of these doors. Just go back and do your thing.
Like, do your freaking job.
I'm still a little confused by that, and it's been a couple weeks since we've seen the movie, so someone please remind me. So I get that he didn't want to be a guardian statue anymore. I understand that.
Sure, he wanted freedom.
He wanted freedom, but like, it was very ambiguous as to why. So what was the point? Like, was he wasn't opening the doors, was he?
I think the doors were just opening because from
it had
my
weakened.
read,
the connection had weakened because the other cat had also come out somehow.
I don't know what was going on with the other cat, to be perfectly honest, but I think the thing is that like the doors were opening anyway. Like, it's just one of those things that you just told me what they were. The people that are in charge of locking the doors.
The closers.
It looks like this is just something that they have to keep an eye out for. Like, this will happen, and they just have to show up whenever it happens.
Yeah.
And I think that Yeah.
So Daijin was taking them to where they were opening, right? It just looked like he was opening them because he was being so ambiguous about what he was actually doing. Am I remembering correctly?
No, Daijin wasn't opening them, but Daijin was definitely leading them to the opening doors. And the way I kind of viewed it as was like the doors are open either way with the Guardians, but if the Guardians are gone, it gets worse. It's like it's like a storm or a hurricane.
Okay.
The Guardians make it into like a lesser tropical storm, but with the Guardians gone, it becomes like a 5 or a 4 hurricane.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, cool. That's
like, I kind of thought that Daijin was like following them, because to me it seemed like they knew, because Daijin isn't doing what he's supposed to be doing, now it falls to us to do this, and so that's why they were, traveling. And I assume he had like Soda had like some knowledge of where the gates were, or at least.
Well, I don't think he expected for all of them to be opening.
Correct. But that's the thing, is like it was made worse because, there was no Guardian. So he was like, we got to go around and try to close as many as possible while we figure out this whole new Guardian thing.
Right.
Or like try to chase Daijin. But
the way that Shinkai has described what Daijin is supposed to be is that he's supposed to be just like nature, like the idea of nature at all, which nature can be quite beautiful, but also quite indifferent to the feelings of humans. It's difficult for us to control, if we can even control it at all. So it's like, I could see that, but I guess there are some mechanical specifics and the personality and motivations of Daijin that don't quite all come together for me. It's something that I might feel more solidified in a take on upon repeat viewings. There was a lot going on with that character.
Right. I'm not going to lie. When he first showed up, I was like, wow, this movie is really about to be hey, Suzume, do you want to be a magical girl? I was like, no, we can't do that.
I was just like, yeah, are you going to make me want to kill this cute animal as well?
No.
Contract?
I mean, that's basically what he did to her, though, if you really think about it.
I mean, a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Suzume is a magical girl. She's a girl. She's got magic. That's all you need.
I mean, sure.
Yeah, she's got a magical keyblade that's tiny. Mm-hmm. But I guess sort of, we've gone on here for a while. I guess let's just pivot to talking about the end. So the ending, to me, did one of those things that in fiction really has grown to frustrate me deeply, where it becomes like a circular, self-fulfilling time loop, because we find out at the very end, sort of after all things are said and done, I forget exactly how we get here, that basically Suzume herself is the reason why Suzume as a child is still able to find and hold on to the childhood chair that her mother made for her, even after the disaster that destroyed her home. And I'm like, well, this is very meaningful, because it's kind of like a you shape your own destiny for yourself kind of thing, which I can vibe with that as a theme. I get that. But I also don't I don't know, it's just a pet peeve of mine. Maybe you guys share this, maybe it doesn't bug you at all, but I'm just like, I hate time loop stories where somebody did the thing for themselves that they had done for them when they were a kid, because it becomes just like this infinite loop of like, and it's very frustrating, difficult for me to wrap my stupid brain around.
So based off that, you hate Back to the Future Part 2?
No, Back to the Future does not do this.
Back to the Future Part 2 does.
No, it does
it
not.
Yes,
the tone in his voice says he's going to die on this hill.
We'll talk about this after the podcast.
Also, I know we don't talk about this franchise anymore, but I think Harry Potter also did that too.
Well, Harry Potter can go over there. I don't care. Back to the Future is important. No, it doesn't do this. We'll talk about this later. But anyway,
Mr. Craver would like to see you after class, Will or Bill.
For me personally, I can definitely see why that is aggravating, because it definitely kind of feels like a little bit of a cop-out. But I think if you're definitely looking at, like, this movie from the lens of, like, this is about somebody kind of working on healing from trauma, from a very awful thing that happened to them. And I personally have never been through a natural disaster, so I can't even begin to fathom what that is like. But I think that kind of handoff between herself is kind of just symbolic of, like, the, how do I want to phrase it? It's like grief is a process and trauma is a process with yourself, and you have to start that journey of healing with yourself. And sometimes that encouragement from yourself to yourself, especially your little self when you've gone through something very traumatic as a child, is very important. And that's kind of how I took that, is her kind of giving that encouragement to her younger self of, like, you know, it is going to be okay, and, like, not easy, but, you know, this is where you're going to end up and it is going to be okay. So I don't know. I was crying by the end, which is not a big shocker at all. But, like, I think that was very powerful to me, at least in the end. So.
And we get all of that after a pretty amazing giant, like, final big battle scene where, like, the big cat fights the big worm. And heck yeah, always down for that.
I did like at the end the character growth that Suzume goes through at the end, where it seems like she's a different person than the person we met at the beginning of the movie. So
yes,
it's kind of, she's in a better place with her aunt, and she seems to have a direction of what she wants to do.
Yeah, she definitely seems to have grown as a person and sort of more solidified her identity, whereas previously it's like she kind of buried those bad things that happened to her, and, like, her faint memories of her mother. It's just like, those things are in the back of my mind, you know, I put those away. But, you know, after she was able to confront them and work through them, she can realize, oh, this is part of my story, you know, and I can take the beauty of this story even throughout all the tragedy and sort of move forward from it. And I think that's great.
I do have to agree with you, though, on, like, the time loop thing, because I just don't like that trope. It doesn't make sense. Like, yes, he's kind of diddled with time before in Your Name and a couple other things, but, like, that to me actually made sense.
Yeah, it's something that I am just a nerd about, and I can also admit that is completely inconsequential. But it's just like a narrative hiccup. But I don't care. It's really fine. I don't care. I don't care.
I love that we found an Austin narrative pet peeve in this recording. I think that's my highlight of this podcast so far.
Yeah,
to counteract my amnesia plot annoyance.
I love amnesia plot. It's my favorite thing. In fact, Bill's hatred of it makes me love it more.
Well, maybe your hatred of these time stories will make me love them more.
Maybe so. But anyway, I think we're kind of getting towards the end of things that we wanted to talk about. Does anybody have any other things that we wanted to cover before we kind of close it out?
Not that I can think of.
Me.
Oh, yes. Bill, I choose you.
The sponsorships were everywhere.
Oh, yeah. We didn't really talk about that.
It's crazy. Well, not crazy, but it's amazing because it shows how big Makoto Shinkai is as a director and as a name within Japan. Because usually in anime productions, they'll come up with a spoof name. So instead of like an Apple phone, it's a Pear phone, something akin to that.
Yeah. Okay, iCarly.
Pear was way before iCarly.
Oh, okay. Well, excuse me. Go ahead.
Ryan, if you will actually somebody one more time, I swear I'm gonna turn you into a chair.
Please. But they didn't do that this time. Where they actually got big names, and in Japan where she went to a genuine Lawson's,
Lawson.
a convenience store, which is huge in Japan. They're like 7-Eleven
She ate an actual Big Mac?
Japan. Yeah, an actual Big Mac with the McDonald's bag and prominent placement. Spotify with known songs that are in there. Like there's a song from Kiki's Delivery Service, the end song from my favorite Guy Next show, His and Her Circumstances, some city pop tunes. Like and they're not made for the movie. Like they actually licensed them, and with the Spotify logo, like right in your face. Aren't
there a few times where they like name drop "Whisper of the Heart"? Am I remembering that correctly? Or there's at least like a there's like a visual gag where it's like Suzume sitting next to the cat on the train. It's just like, well, that's obviously a visual callback to "Whisper of the Heart."
And just there's also, from what I read, like over 40 sponsorships from different regions across Japan.
Wow.
That were involved in this movie. So it just goes to show just how big Shinkai was. And I know I shouldn't be nerding out about sponsorships, but it was just astounding to me to see like Spotify and Lawson's and McDonald's in there.
Well, they know Shinkai is where it's at. So if you're going to put an advertisement in your anime movie, putting it in one of his films is a sure bet.
For sure.
Because, I mean, it ran in Japanese theaters for like 6 months and only like just now, within the last few weeks, stopped. So it's a major hit. Major hit.
That's wild.
And it was a major hit in the United States too, where I think it reportedly got like $2 million.
Nice.
Based off the week that Crunchyroll ran it. And it was also interesting because it wasn't a Fathom event. It was tradition. It was a traditional theatrical release that Crunchyroll has been doing with their small theatrical runs, like the One Piece movies and such, where they run it for a week, but unlike Fathom events, you have to deal with like 30 minutes of trailers.
Right.
Yeah, that is the downside of Fathom.
Well, you were
that's
saying
the upside of that.
Yeah, that's the upside.
Sorry,
of
the 30 minutes of trailers.
Yeah, because if you go to a Fathom event, most of the time all of the trailers are fairly short and they're like directly relevant to the thing you're watching. So like you'll get ads for Right Stuff, you'll get ads for like Anime NYC, or I've even seen Animazement up there at one point. So that's pretty cool about Fathom events. I did note it was a lot more traditional here with Suzume, and that's probably why. But I'm really glad that, because Weathering with You was a G-Kids thing, so it's kind of like Shinkai has been hopping around distributors here. So that was very much sort of the Fathom events model. But Your Name and Suzume were both Funimation and now Crunchyroll. But Your Name felt like it took forever to come out over here, but with Suzume it was only like a few months, which is great. So I'm glad that they have learned from the past and got it out here expediently.
Yeah, I don't
really
like
that it wasn't.
I remember seeing Your Name like twice in theaters because we saw it one time subbed and one time dubbed, but I don't remember like how long we were waiting prior. I just remember that all of us were not sure if we were going to be able to see it because it was obviously limited theaters. And then when we found out it was coming to Greensboro, I remember we all got really excited and booked multiple tickets for it. Yeah, I liked with this release because they did a more general release. It's more widely available to cities that don't usually get Fathom events.
Sure.
Like this isn't Suzume, but my friend Michael, who wanted to go see the One Piece movie, was excited because that was being shown in Goldsboro.
Oh, jeez.
Goldsboro is a much smaller town that doesn't get those Fathom events. So because Crunchyroll did a week release, they were able to put it in more theaters. And because it was a normal release, it was not just like you only have these 2 days to see it.
Yeah.
They were showing it throughout at least the entire week. So you had a lot more chances.
All right, so as we're closing here, final thoughts about the movie, and what is the one iconic scene that you will think of whenever you think about Suzume? I'll start with Ryan. We'll go in reverse Discord order.
I think probably the Ferris wheel. Either that
Ferris
or
wheel.
over the city when he's doing parkour on the worm's back. Because I was getting, like, secondhand nervous about the Ferris wheel because she was, like, hanging on for dear life at one point, and I'm like, I don't really know. I know she's going to survive because she's the protagonist, but I don't really know if I can, like, handle this at the moment because it was making me very anxious. But it was a very cool scene, and then, like, just showing what was happening from the perspective of Soda, because she was just kind of wandering in the realm or whatever, and he's seeing her just, like, existing inside this Ferris wheel car, and he's just like, you need to get out of there, like, now.
So did it put you on the edge of your chair?
No, I was fairly reclined.
Tori?
For me, I would say, I was gonna say Ferris wheel. Ryan already picked that, so probably.
Yeah, no copying me.
Okay, no copying. The scene probably where she has to use Sota as the talisman, and he starts to, like, crystallize. Just that whole kind of sequence of, like, the big thing about the drop on the city. I was very anxious during all of that. So kind of that and the lead up to all of that, I think.
Yeah, that was a good sequence. Like, whenever they finally get to Tokyo, like the big city where it just has escalated at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bill?
To not copy, I would say the sequence where the other cat shows the sort of negative feelings that the ant has, and then just them being super sour in the car as the Spotify as the guy is like, "Come on, let's try to lighten the mood." He's
jamming out to Spotify.
Yeah, it's not. It's like, I'm playing good tunes, and no one's appreciating them.
I appreciated them.
I think as did I. I almost screamed in the theater when His and Her Circumstances song came on. I was like, ah!
That actually, you just said something that triggered something I wanted to ask. So, how many people were in the theater with you guys watching this?
Like 10?
10 total, including us, I think.
Yeah.
It was me and 2 other dudes.
Okay.
It was me, my brother, and 4 other people.
Okay.
Now, when Tobias saw it, he said his theater was fairly full.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
he saw it like opening night, though, right?
I believe so. Maybe that opening Friday. I can't remember what day of the week we saw it, but anyway, it was not.
It was like a Monday or a Tuesday.
Yeah, not a prime night, but for me, I think the scene that will stand out for me is probably the one that was kind of joked on in the lead up to the film coming out, which is just the Princess and the Frog-esque image of her, like, closing her eyes and getting ready to kiss the chair. So I think that's funny. It's a funny image to just see a girl, like, trying to kiss a chair. Like, that's just funny to me, so it'll probably stick out in my mind. So not a very eloquent or a meaningful scene by any means, but it will give me a chuckle whenever I reflect upon it. So that's good enough for me.
All right.
Cool. All right, guys. So I think we've said probably all there is to say about Suzume for us at this present moment. So thank you guys for joining me once again, and thank you listeners at home for listening through to the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to listen to more episodes by Third Impact Anime, you can always find us over on our website, thirdimpactanime.com, where you can see a content archive of all the previous episodes that we've ever done. You can follow me, Austin, over on Twitter for the time being. I'm also on Mastodon, both at Bebop Shock, and of course I am also on the greatest social media platform, Letterboxd. You can find us over there. You can find Third Impact Anime on Twitter and Mastodon as well, and on Instagram, and We've got a really cool Discord. We've got a lot of cool things for you to be able to connect to us with, and you can find out all of those things again on our website, thirdimpactanime.com. Tori, where can people find you if you wish to be found?
Yeah, I don't really use Twitter or anything anymore, but if you still want to follow me over there, I might pick it back up during con time. Twitter/Mastodon is both worst waifu, but I do time to time float through the Discord. That's pretty much the place to find me. So yeah, that's it.
I'm still on the Twitter, but we'll see how that goes. So instead, you can follow me on Letterboxd, WBForeman39, there where I write movie reviews, and as once Wise Sage said, read a book, which I am doing on Goodreads, where I'm cataloging my manga and comic book backlog, and decided this is going to get me to do it. I've gotten through like 200 trades so far, so come read my little dumb reviews of the comics and manga I'm reading on Goodreads. I should be like WBForeman39 on there, or my given name, so you can find me there. And I'm also on the Third Impact Discord, where I'm usually Mr. Newsman, posting the news of entertainment and such.
I don't really use any social media anymore, but you can find me on Twitter at MidshelfRyan if you want to follow whenever I have a random thought or an angry rant about a company, or anytime I complete a video game. That's pretty much the only time I post on Twitter. I'm much more active on TikTok nowadays at Bowie Sensei. I post videos of games of my dog Yoda, and he's a very good boy. And also just heard his name, so he perked up at my feet right now. And I'm also active on the Discord as one of several names, but my current profile picture is Darth Revan, so if you see that, that's me.
We want to shout out Yoda for being our special guest this week.
Yes, thank you, Yoda. You've been a very good boy.
Good boy.
Didn't scream during the podcast.
Yeah, my cat napped through the whole thing. I was very, very proud of her. She's still sleeping.
Oh yeah, shout out to Boba as well. Good kitty.
Yes.
Good for Boba.
Good for Boba. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining me for Suzume, and we'll see you in the next episode. Don't pull stone cats out of the ground. Just don't do it. It's
For
bad
sure.
But
Okay.
get them spayed and neutered.
For sure.
Bye-bye.
灰色が変わってく強くなりたいと願えば願うほどなぜだろうその目は私を弱くさせる泣いてなんかないよ泣くわけがないでしょあなたが見てるのはスズメの涙
It's a giant Alaskan boa!